Hi, everyone, and welcome to Rising Stories podcast. I'm Corrine Sandifer, your host. Each week, I interview a business owner or author, and here on Rising Stories, we chat about building our businesses and working like a boss and slaying our tasks that we have to do each day. You'll learn about the best apps, how these business women are making it work, and all about the best tools and practices that they're using. And because this show is called Rising Stories, my guests usually share an everyday story that is sure to touch your heart and soul. And we also hit on topics like work-life balance, living with intention, and dreaming big. Before I introduce you to my guest today, I would love it if you would connect with me on social media. I am on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, and Facebook, all under Corrine Sandifer. On Facebook, I have this great group called Soul Care for the Business Owner. So I would love it if you would connect with me there or on my business page, which is at Corrine Sandifer. So look that up. But the main place that I absolutely love to connect with people, and I usually find my guests there. So if you have a guest suggestion, go on Instagram and tag me on their post or on their page, because that's kind of how I connect with people. I love to see what they're doing, and if it catches my eye, I ask them on the show. So connect with me on Instagram on at Corrine Sandifer, and I love doing those Insta stories, so I hope you're watching. Also, if you don't mind, heading over to iTunes and leaving me a review, because that's how we get the word out about this podcast. I would love it if you would share it with a friend on Facebook or Instagram. My guest today is a smart businesswoman by the name of Katy Brandt. She is a local yoga instructor who opened her first storefront yoga studio here in the heart of Nashville. I loved talking with Katy because she gives great advice on her thought process to launching her business. She also explains the 8 limbs of yoga, which I had been so curious about. She tells us right here on Rising Stories all about that. So here's my conversation with Katy Brandt. Hi, Katy.
Hi, Corrine.
Thanks for coming on.
I'm happy to be here today.
We are like neighbors because you're in Nashville.
Yes.
And you own a studio, is it a yoga studio?
Yeah, we're a yoga studio in the Bellevue neighborhood of Nashville, so out to the southwest of town. Not a hot yoga studio, just traditional, mostly flow classes, catering to beginners and older students, people who have injury, things like that. So it's kind of a kinder, gentler approach than some of the other studios.
What are the other aspects that you teach? Because I think that's the only part I know. I do go to my gym and do my gym yoga there. So what are some of the other?
Well, there are 8 limbs in yoga. One limb is the asana, which are the physical postures that is what's familiar to most people in the West. There's pranayama, which is basically breath work. So different breathing exercises, the way we breathe, we might sit and breathe alternate nostrils to balance mood or just kind of brings us into balance. There are breath that we use to cleanse the body. There's, of course, meditation, which you can do a meditation while you're moving or while you're doing breath exercise, or you can just sit. A lot of the physical postures were developed a couple thousand years ago as a way to prepare the body to sit for long periods in meditation. And then the practice becomes the control of the senses, the drawing within, so that you can reach that higher plane of consciousness that so many people are looking for. And that's where the healing really occurs. And the first 2 limbs of yoga, actually, that we just blow right past in the West, we don't even pay attention, are called the yamas and the niyamas. And I like to describe them as the 10 commandments of yoga. Basically, there are 5 yamas and 5 niyamas, and they're basically guidelines for how we live. Things like non-harming, non-greed, cleanliness, the kinds of things that you would want to do to be a good citizen.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you don't really learn those things at your local gym. But if you come into a studio, you'll start to learn more of those things.
You get deeper into it and find out the whys and
yeah, exactly.
Katy, you said you just recently opened your studio here in Nashville. Take me through the steps of how do you get to that point? What are the steps to actually opening your own studio? Do you have to are you finding a studio that already has, it's already equipped because it's not an easy thing. You can't just do yoga anywhere. I guess you can. You can, but.
Yeah, you kind of can, but.
You can and can't.
For me, I would have loved to find an existing studio for sale. Of course, the question is then determining whether or not the sale price is worthwhile.
Right.
I started from scratch. I was in a situation where I had been practicing for a very long time. I was a certified instructor, and I taught a couple of classes here and there, but hadn't been really serious about it. And I was leaving my previous career. And several people around me started saying, you need to open a yoga studio. And I, of course, said, that's ridiculous. I don't need to open a yoga studio. There are lots of yoga studios in Nashville, which certainly closer to the downtown area, the universities, the places like that. There are a lot of studios that teach in different styles, and there are a lot of really great options. And so I kind of tried to push the idea away for a while, and then just kind of one day I started thinking, so I did a web search and I looked and I realized that there was a large section of the city down to the southwest that had nothing for that community. So, you could find some classes maybe at the local Y or a class in the Gold's Gym, out in the middle of the floor with everybody lifting their weights, which is not the best situation. And I thought, well, gee, maybe there's opportunity here. So I really started from scratch. No real idea. I do have a teacher, a mentor, who is a senior yoga instructor, someone who travels around the country and around the world. She was actually just in Vietnam teaching, who is really a senior level. So I called her and I said, if I do this, will you help me? Will you come and teach at my studio, have workshops, things like that? And so she was really encouraging. So I found a real estate agent. I went and found a space. People set up in old houses. Some people will set up in a place. Maybe they have a converted garage behind their house. I was looking for a storefront that had some street visibility. Mm-hmm. So I was looking for a space that was large enough to have a large room. And then, of course, I went through all those business steps of I got my real estate agent to help me find a space. I reviewed the lease and, all those negotiations. And then I had to renovate the space. Mm-hmm. So hire a contractor, get them in, hire an architect to make drawings. And it took me, I think from the time I decided to really seriously open the studio, it took me about 9 months to identify the space, get it renovated. I had to incorporate with the state, get my business licenses.
That's a long time. That's almost a year.
It took about 9 months. I think I started in January and we opened mid-September.
Okay.
So it was about 9 months to get to the point where I could open the doors. And of course, I had to furnish the studio. And of course, with a studio, there's not much furniture.
Right. That's a good thing. No, not much overhead.
Well, right. But I practice a form that, like I said, it's kind of kinder, gentler. We use a lot of props. So I had to order bolsters and blankets and blocks and all of those things and have places to store them. And, I kind of put together, from my years of practice, I know what the things are that I need. And I just cobbled that all together and opened my doors and started welcoming people in.
That's great. Yeah, well, I think people forget how long it takes and your preparation in doing everything that, to open up a brick and mortar place. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot of time, a lot of, planning. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, one of the things was that you already had a clientele.
I had a few students, but really, I don't live in the area of town that I opened. And the students that I had actually were in even another part of the city. So I was really kind of starting from scratch in a community that I knew needed services and that wanted it. But I hired some instructors who are from that area, a couple that have some following. But it's interesting with yoga students. What I've found is they get used to practicing where they practice, getting them to go somewhere else. So even my regular students don't necessarily come over to my studio.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of starting over. So early on, I got a lot of people who were curious. I made sure my signage was put up really early.
Mm-hmm.
So I had the sign on the storefront. I had banners that said "Coming soon."
Oh, yeah.
Listing the website. I had my website built early so that people could go and look and get information. When we first opened, I did do a postcard mailer in the surrounding area. Honestly, that wasn't that useful.
Not the postcards were not useful.
Yeah, a few people noticed that they saw them, but they didn't really return much. I also tried some radio ads. That I had a few people say, "Oh, I heard your ad," but I didn't have anybody come in and say, "I'm here because I heard your ad."
Oh, yeah.
I had people who were already coming say they heard their ad, heard the ad. So
that's good to know.
Yeah, I have found people through Facebook, and I think with a business like this, word of mouth has been really important. And one thing I did do early was I found myself a teaching position. Just one class, actually, at the local YMCA, which is not very far from my studio. One class a week that I teach there, so I could start to get to know people in the community. Sorry about that. And so as I started to get to know people in the community, they would tell their friends who maybe weren't Y members. A few of them have come over to the studio. It's just really word of mouth and a little bit Facebook. Certainly, I get some attention on Facebook, and people are obviously following the page, and certainly students that I already have are following the page. It's amazing how many people look at your Facebook and never show up in the studio. I've done a little bit of Groupon and Living Social, really because I kind of look at it as, in some ways, it's free advertising. People who buy the Groupon come in and there's a huge discount for them. But a lot of people are just seeing it on Groupon, and so they're getting that impression, and maybe they'll go and look at my website. But it doesn't cost me anything if they're just looking. I don't have to pay Groupon for it. But
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Groupon just takes a cut of the price of whatever you bought. So if I'm selling a 10-class pass and say it's a 10-class pass for $60, I get 30, they get 30. But if somebody just looks at the deal and looks at my website and doesn't buy, then I've got an impression on my website, which boosts my Google rating for Google search. And I haven't had to pay Groupon anything for that. And Groupon is spending all the money to put things out there that have my name on it.
That's good to know. I had no idea about that, how Groupon worked.
But you have to watch it with services because, and how much you do of that kind of thing, because what I've really learned is that the people who don't come and pay full price for service don't value the service the same way. My best students, my most loyal students who come on a regular basis and are repeatedly coming back are people who came in the first day, asked questions, paid full price. And I don't offer a free first class. I don't offer a reduced price first class. And it's really because as a service, I need to show that I value what I do. And if I'm constantly discounting, then I'm basically sending the message that what I'm doing isn't worth full price.
That's very true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't do very much discounting at all.
Yeah.
I try to do other things for my loyal students that kind of keep them really loyal. I give them some flexibility. You know, if their pass is expired but they didn't bring their credit card, I let them come to class once anyway. Or, you know, things that help loyal students, but you know, they build that loyalty and they've come and they've usually purchased several passes and maybe brought friends and different things like that. So it's kind of individualized attention.
Yeah. So tell me, Katy, do you have a favorite app on your phone or iPad that you just love?
So I'm on Facebook a lot.
So your Facebook app, probably. Do you have an app? Do you use that app on your phone?
Yeah, the Facebook app.
Yeah. And so I always ask Nashville people that come on my show to tell me their favorite Nashville restaurant. What is that for you?
My favorite Nashville restaurant is a place called House of Kebab. It's a Persian restaurant over on Thompson Lane, just past Nolensville Road. It's really simple. It's been there 20 years.
I've been there. I love it.
Yeah, the food is so good, and you know, it's traditional.
Have you tried their soups?
Yes,
they have great soups.
Yeah, I usually get the bamiye. That's my favorite, which is it's an okra stew.
Oh, so, I don't think I've tried that one.
Yeah, it's my favorite, but that's where I would go. You know, it's also a place that's not so expensive. There are lots of trendy restaurants in Nashville, and they're all over, and there's plenty of places to go. But I really like the places that are kind of simple and homey.
Yeah. So you've probably been here about as long as I have. I've been here 26 years.
Yeah, I've been here 24.
Yeah. So what are you loving these days, Katy, that you just like tell your girlfriends or talk about it?
Well, I have an 11-year-old daughter, so I talk about her a lot.
Aww.
And we have a lot of pets. I mean, earlier you could probably hear my dog barking in the background.
I heard your puppies.
And yes. So, you know, my daughter and I, we both are pet enthusiasts. So we have cats and dogs that we spend a lot of time with. We've been doing a lot of volunteer work lately for the Pet Community Center, which is a spay and neuter clinic here in Nashville that does free spay and neuter for some areas, and certainly reduced price basic veterinary services. You know, and they've been really successful in reducing the pet overpopulation in Nashville. So we do that a lot.
Yeah, that's great. Anything else that you're loving?
Oh, you know, I spend a lot of time in the studio getting it started, and so I really love when I can come home and have quiet time.
Yeah. You know, I understand.
I don't get to do enough of that.
Yeah. Well, because you work with, you know, in services, you work with people, and there's people all around, and you're, like we mentioned earlier, you may or may not be touching, you know, kind of helping them and really trying to connect with them, and that can be exhausting. You know, both emotionally and physically, and of course you probably do classes all day long because you want to do some classes in the morning for those morning people and then after work people. So you probably have a sandwiched, you know.
I kind of my work schedule depends on the day, but usually you're right. Teaching in the morning, teaching in the evening. Usually some time in the afternoon on my own. In my case, I teach 6 days a week.
Wow.
So, yeah,
that's
just
great.
The way it works out.
Yeah, that's a lot of time.
You know, yeah, but I was able to build it. You know, I have my schedule set up so that we are closed on Friday afternoons and evenings, and I have other people teaching on Saturday, and I don't start to teach again until Sunday evening. So I have a nice weekend because
that's good.
I go from about 1 o'clock Friday till 5 o'clock on Sunday. Unless I have to teach for somebody who's out sick or traveling. Or
and then you have to do that. Yeah.
Right.
Well, thanks, Katy, so much for coming on. I'm sorry that I've had coughing in between, but your studio is called Lotus Blooming Yoga?
It's Lotus Blooming Yoga. We're on Highway 100 at Temple Road in Bellevue.
Awesome. In the Nashville area. So if y'all are in town, it'd be great for you to
drop in and see people come in.
Yeah, especially people that are vacationing. They want to do a yoga class.
Yeah, I get a fair number of people who come in and say, that they are visiting family for a holiday or just there on vacation that come in and try. And we've had good response that way. And I always have a holiday class. So any holiday that comes, we may not have regularly scheduled classes, but we always have a class that day.
That's great.
That's really nice.
Thanks so much for coming on.
You're welcome. It's been good talking to you.
Wow, I loved that she chose to use a mentor and tap into that mentor-mentee relationship to help her launch her business. What a smart thing, very wise. And I loved all of the descriptions of how she worked her business, launched, and how she was ahead of the game and made sure that she had her signage out. It's very important as you're starting a business, especially a brick and mortar. And I love the tip on Groupon. Who knew about the free advertising and the, boost in your website clicks? So I thought that was really helpful too. Thanks again for joining me on Rising Stories podcast. If you missed something that you wanted to jot down from this episode, no worries, because I've added a whole lot to the iTunes description in this app. I've also got the show notes at CorrineSandifer.com. Also, would love it if you would hit subscribe or on iTunes or go over to Stitcher and make sure that you're subscribed there so you can get the latest episodes right when they come out. Please consider supporting Rising Stories podcast by purchasing books and products mentioned on this show with the link provided in the show notes. Thanks so much for listening and keep rising in your own story.